in air conditioning capacity by 2040 in order to maintain safe classroom temperatures.
Similarly, as these increased heat waves occur, Pennsylvania municipalities are going to need to open and expand their cooling center operations. Municipalities that contain vulnerable areas, which are areas that have high density populations of older residents, children, unhoused people, people who work outside, communities of color, and low income communities are the most susceptible to these heat related impacts, and they have the highest demand for additional cooling centers, and they often have the least amount of resources to actually open up and operate these cooling centers. In order to adequately scale up cooling centers to deal with these additional heat days and to protect these vulnerable communities, Allegheny County and communities within Allegheny County will need to spend about $5.7 million by 2040. Next slide, please.
I'm sure that a lot of people in the room are familiar with heat islands, but essentially these are areas where extreme heat is intensified because buildings and roads absorb and radiate the sun's heat, making the area much warmer during the day compared to like natural spaces that like forests and parks and other like tree-lined streets. Planting trees within heat islands is an effective and really common strategy to reduce the severity of a heat island's impact on the surrounding area and really reduce risk for heat-related illnesses. To mitigate the effect of urban heat island, communities in Allegheny County will need to spend $40.3 million by 2040 on planting and maintaining trees in urban areas.
Now we're going to shift our focus to the precipitation-related impacts that were assessed in this study. And again, we have a map here of the total cost to address precipitation-related impacts all across Pennsylvania by 2040, and you can notice again, Allegheny County is really a hotspot for this. So from spending billions of gallons of untreated sewage water overflowing into waterways to increased cracking and potholes on roads, Pennsylvania's infrastructure is already overwhelmed by the level of precipitation it experiences, and it's only going to get worse. To date, Pennsylvania has experienced a 5 to 10% increase in average annual precipitation as compared to a baseline. And Pennsylvania will also see a shift in seasonal precipitation patterns. So not only is the amount of precipitation going to increase, the timing and the severity of that precipitation will increase as well. Scientists have found that, like many neighboring communities and states, that the annual precipitation might only go up a little bit, but the precipitation will occur more intensely when it does occur. So it might occur less frequently throughout the year, but the storms that come are dumping a lot more water, and that's additionally stresses the roads and the wastewater systems. In order to combat the changes in precipitation, communities in Allegheny County will need to consider a broad range of strategies and adaptation projects to address this. We looked at 4 different adaptation projects in this study, and the first is increasing storm drainage capacity to combat flooding. The second is increased road maintenance due to increased precipitation, wearing and tearing the roads. The third was increased proactive measures to stabilize bridges so that they could handle heavier flows in the waterways. And the last was protecting against landslides.
So the next impact I'm going to talk about is specifically the stormwater drainage infrastructure, and I will warn you it's a little bit gross. We are going to talk about raw sewage here, but as probably many of you know, 75% of Pittsburgh, rainwater, wastewater, and sewage all flow through the same combined system, meaning that an increase in any single water source can lead to an overflow of the entire system. So during extreme weather events, wastewater system operators are often forced to activate a system bypass, which allows wastewater to flow past part or even all of the treatment process in order to prevent such an overflow event. In other words, untreated wastewater, which includes raw sewage, bypasses the treatment process to flow directly into the surrounding waterways. And for context, Pittsburgh's 3 rivers serve as the main source of drinking water for 90% of Allegheny County residents. In a typical year, approximately 9 billion gallons of untreated sewage and wastewater overflows directly into the waterways in Allegheny County alone. In order to adapt wastewater systems to withstand projected increases in these wet weather events, Allegheny County municipalities will have to pay nearly $1 billion by 2040. That number is $967 million.
Next slide, please. Wetter weather and greater temperatures also increase degradation of local roads. In order for county and municipal roads to stay at their current service level, Allegheny County municipalities will need to invest about $143 million in proactive road maintenance costs by 2040. And I just want to note that that figure does not include state-owned or federally owned and operated roads and highways. A few reports found that Pennsylvania already ranks at the bottom in the nation for road conditions, and not only is there cost to repair roads or protect them from these increased temperatures and precipitation rates, but driving on poor roads can cost the average person more than $600 in annual car maintenance costs. A burden that will only worsen if road conditions are not maintained at their current level and as they continue to get worse due to climate change. Next slide, please. Similarly, Pennsylvania ranks second in the country with the highest number of bridges classified as poor in poor condition by the Federal Highway Administration, and an increase in precipitation will cause higher flow in the waterways. That flow rates can really destabilize the piers and abutments that hold up bridges, and so we estimated the cost to proactively stabilize the bridges so that they can handle these higher flows that would otherwise threaten the structural integrity of the bridges. And that cost for Allegheny County municipalities is about $29.5 million by 2040. Lastly, we looked at the cost to combat landslides in Allegheny County. That cost, as I mentioned earlier, is the second highest cost facing Allegheny County because of its geology, and it's about $330 million by 2040. The Pittsburgh area is uniquely susceptible to landslides compared to other places in the state, and the cost to combat these landslides is building retaining walls to kind of hold up the structures in the sediment that is along road bases so that the landslides don't fall and degrade the roads more. And as a result of climate, can you go back to the last slide, please? As a result of the climate-induced precipitation throughout the state, the rate of landslides is already outpacing what the state has budgeted to provide emergency cleanup, and it's diverting funds that could have otherwise been spent on other public infrastructure projects. Additionally, landslides that occur really pose a threat to homeowners as well because insurance often doesn't cover the cost of recovering from landslides, and that cost to homeowners directly could be up to $1 million if their property is damaged by a landslide. And that cost is not something that is estimated in the study, but it should be considered when thinking about landslides. Next slide, please.
So that concludes, the top lines for the 7 impacts that are facing Allegheny County. But I know that you just heard a lot of numbers, and all of this is of course available on our website in the report itself. But we thought it'd be interesting to show some of these costs from a different perspective, especially given the fact that we are presenting to you, county councilors. So we aggregated the costs by county council district. Obviously, all the districts in Pittsburgh have the highest cost, which is mostly due to that increasing stormwater drainage capacity. But we also see huge costs for districts 1 and 2 as well. And maybe I'll just leave that slide for like 5 seconds for folks to kind of take that in for a minute.
Can you put it in present mode?
Perfect.
Sorry, it's like small. Can you like present it?
Is there a way to zoom it in a little bit? If not, we can make this available after the fact. Next slide, please. So the last point I want to leave you with regards to the study itself is the fact that climate adaptations there's a huge equity implication here. the costs that we talked about today will absolutely not be felt equally across populations in the state and especially even to within the county itself. By 2040, the average Pennsylvania resident will face about $5,000 per capita in climate adaptation costs. But Pennsylvanians who live in rural, high poverty, and high disability areas of the Commonwealth will face substantially higher costs. Specifically, rural communities will face over $1,000 more per capita because of needed investments in roads, bridges, landslide prevention, and cooling centers. So I also wanted to, for folks to bear that in mind, that we talk about these costs in the aggregate, but they will be felt, not only the costs themselves differently across different communities, but of course the impacts and the human experience as well. Next slide, please. Which is a good transition into this human experience. We talked a lot about the top line findings. We're of course happy to answer lots of questions about methodologies, but this is not always, it's a lot to take in, and we want to make sure that we do put the human experience and the human context on this as well. So we've invited a few members of the community to give us that perspective. We are welcoming Fawn Walker Montgomery, who is the CEO and founder of Take Action Advocacy Group, and Phoebe Reese, who is the program director of Food Project. Fawn, do you want to start us off?
Okay, is that better? Okay. Thank you. So you all, my name is Fawn Walker Montgomery. I'm the CEO of Take Action Advocacy Group, and I'm also a consultant as well. But more importantly, I'm a community member and a resident. I reside in McKeesport, Pennsylvania. So when I first heard or was contacted about this, I said to myself, what is the real cost of climate? And I didn't think of the billions of dollars that go into this. I thought about the people and the costs that we directly endure. Climate change affects everyone, but of course, like everything else in this country, it affects Black people and other marginalized groups at a double rate. And when I say marginalized, I'm speaking of the communities who lack issues with economic stability, which is a whole hell of a lot of communities in Allegheny County. So of course this is due to white supremacy and racism. And this is one of the reasons why we call environmental racism the new Jim Crow. So today I'm going to speak to you from the perspective of a Black woman that has grown up in the Mon Valley, and I'm going to speak from the intersection of environmental racism and climate change. So what does this mean for us, for people like myself? So for us, this means not having clean air, not having clean water, flooding every year in the same spot. Every year. I'm 44. So I grew up in McKeesport in the Mon Valley area. Every year in the same spot it floods. It means extreme heat in schools. It means health conditions. It at times means death for us. So how does this show up? It shows up with our eyes burning and our ears itching in certain parts of Clarendon and in certain parts of McKeesport. It means when you drive through certain parts of your community, you're going to smell rotten eggs. It means that you can't drink the water. It means that you have transportation issues because there's all these intersections. So it means that you can't get to a cooling center because you don't have access to reliable transportation. Maybe you can't afford to get to the cooling center because you can't afford to get on a bus, or you can't afford to get an Uber or a Lyft. Me and my daughter both have asthma, and in Clarendon there's a high rate of asthma and COPD from, of course, U.S. Steel. This also means having lead in your water or your home due to chip paint, having chemicals found in your water every year, and having water advisories put out every year. I've never not known a water advisory to be put out in McKeesport. I've never drunk the water in McKeesport. I drink bottled water. I was raised to not drink bottled water ever, and just kind of accept that that was the normal of people who, live in the Mon Valley. It means at times having your community called a sacrifice zone. I need y'all to sit with that. I live in an area that's called a sacrifice zone. It means being have to work for certain companies or corporations that you know are actively killing you. But you feel like you have no other options at a job to be able to financially secure your family, so you may go work for some of these corporations. That's what that means. It means having to live with these things. In 2017, there was a countywide survey released by the health department that found that the cancer rates in Clayton and Braddock were slightly higher than that in the country as a whole. As a whole. So people are dying literally every day. And the air pollution from the fossil fuels is known as the invisible killer from all of these things I have brought up to you all today. It's time to hold everyone accountable, from the officials to the big oil and gas corporations, for the emotional and financial costs of climate change. They need to help pay for the damages and admit to their wrongdoing. It also goes back to land control, because let's not forget that we are all on stolen land. Officials and big oil and gas companies, they know about what's going on. They're aware of what they're doing is causing these issues, but they continue to do it, and they continue to put this information out. And when they found out about it, they just kind of pivoted, to changing the information. They're knowingly killing people. And this is a familiar story from tobacco to some of the other examples that you could bring up. But now I think it's time to pivot toward the people, and we need to listen to the people, and we should not have to be paying for this. So you all do definitely need to look into a climate lawsuit. Allegheny taxpayers should not have to pay this burden of $1.6 billion. And let me say this, if I'm going to come here, y'all know I've been here before to this county council, if I'm going to come here and tell you all to pursue a lawsuit, I'm going to say if you do that, then you need to make sure that the money gets to the people it needs to get to. There should be a community benefits agreement with this. There should be some form of dual or shared power. A lot of times these things come down the pipeline, and I'm sure my comrade from the Green Project will bring some of these things up. When these lawsuits and things come out, we never see it. The people never see these funds. So if you're going to pursue this, pursue it with a CBA attached, a community benefits agreement attached. Make sure that people are directly involved with it. And I heard a lot about trees earlier, and I know that trees are helpful, but I feel like that's also the go-to solution when it comes to these, and I'm frequently tired of a tree. The tree is not saving my life. I know in the long run there's intersections of the connection, but if you bring more trees to my community, I need you to let me grow the tree. I need you to explain to me why it is so important. The solutions that you are bringing up have to be practical, and they have to be able to be relatable to the people who actually need it. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Ms. Walker, Montgomery. We appreciate it. And we agree that monies should redress the harms that they cause. Hi, good evening. My name is Phoebe Reese. I'm Service Program Director with the Breathe Project. The Breathe Project is a clearinghouse for science-based information on air quality in Pittsburgh and southwestern Pennsylvania. We also facilitate the Breathe Collaborative, which is comprised of more than 60 organizations throughout the region. And together we work to improve air quality, eliminate climate pollution, and make our region a healthy, prosperous place to live. Thank you to the Allegheny County Council Committee on Sustainability and Green Initiatives for hosting us tonight. I'm a proud constituent of Councilmember Prezio. We just had a landslide on Saxonburg Boulevard last week. It closed for several days due to increased precipitation. And thank you to the Center for Climate Integrity for focusing on our region. This is a testament that a national organization has devoted their resources to Pennsylvania and Allegheny County in particular. That is how important we are to the climate fight. We really are. And as Allegheny County Council members, you have a lot of power to help combat climate change and equally, if not more important, help community health. We've seen the Center for Climate Integrity's report tonight. The Pennsylvania Auditor General issued a report in 2019 called The Climate Crisis, the Rising Cost of Inaction. Inaction will have even higher costs, not just to our taxpayer dollars, but to our community health. And the financial burden, if we don't act now and hold the oil and gas industries accountable for the true cost of their products, that's going to be an even higher cost to future generations, and that's not fair to pass it along. It's not fair for this huge financial burden of $1.6 billion to Allegheny County to fall to us now, and the inflated costs down the future is not fair for future generations. So we wanted to talk some specifics about how the oil and gas industry is harming Allegheny County through climate change now. Number one, air quality. Ms. Walker-Montgomery touched on that. From the Pennsylvania Auditor General's 2019 climate report, quote, pollution from burning fossil fuels and rising temperatures will compound already worsening air pollution. It continues, infants, children, adults with chronic upper respiratory disease or heart disease, and people who are economically disadvantaged are most at risk of harm from air pollution. So Allegheny County residents today already suffer adverse health from poor air quality. Climate change and the continued burning of fossil fuels will make them worse. This is expensive in dollars and in our bodies, our health, and our future. Allegheny County already ranks among the worst 1% of counties in the United States for cancer risk from industrial point source pollution. Climate change is going to make that worse. Medical professionals in Clairton, we just heard from, report evidence of children with higher rates of respiratory distress and asthma because of air pollution. Nearly 3 times the national average. That's currently. Climate change is making it worse. The cancer risk for residents of Allegheny County is over 6 times higher than the national average of residents of other urban counties. Climate change is making it worse, and the oil and gas industry needs to be held accountable for that. I'm wondering if you could go back to that slide that shows the pie chart, if that's handy. There's another point that's of direct importance to Allegheny County is a tiny sliver on that pie chart. It's maintaining bridges. That constitutes 1.7%. It's a little sliver, but that could be a major catastrophe. Pittsburgh is the city of bridges. It's like iconographic for us. And it's a critical part of our infrastructure, as you know. Excuse me. We know it as residents and as elected officials, you know how critical bridges are. One field bridge can be devastating. We've seen that with the Fern Hollow Bridge, which made, national news. We've had other, iconic, sadly, iconic in a bad way, impacts to infrastructure from increased precipitation. We have the sinkhole bust in downtown. We're going to see more instances like this. The other thing I want to point out about bridges is that bridges are the most vulnerable part of our railroad infrastructure. Certainly you're familiar with East Palestine, which Ohio train derailment, which just had its first anniversary in February. That train route, what burned there was a petrochemical called vinyl chloride. And that train route passes right through Allegheny County. Can you imagine if that had happened 40 miles, closer? That would have been us. Can you imagine the increased stress on our bridges from climate change? They're already, the NTSB, I'm sorry to say that, the NTSB called it neglect. And we're talking about further impacts. Pittsburgh is on the oxyvinyls rail route that carries vinyl chloride from Texas and Louisiana, where it's produced, all the way to New Jersey, where it's turned into plastic products. We are at risk, and climate change is making it worse, and the oil and gas industry needs to be held accountable. We learned, there was a 2023 poll last year of likely voters in Pennsylvania on both sides of the political spectrum. And 90% of respondents said oil and gas companies should be required to pay at least some of the costs to help local communities in Pennsylvania adapt to climate change. Allegheny County, let's do this. We're ready to hold big oil accountable. And it's time for polluters to pay their fair share for our health of today and for our health of generations tomorrow. Thank you.